China has slammed a visit by US lawmakers to Taiwan, the second that they've made in a month. Beijing says that people from Washington should not play the Taiwan card because it's a losing hand. The visit is a fresh sign of American support as Beijing increases pressure on the island. Victoria Jen with this report.
The visit came as a surprise. It's only 2 weeks since the last visit by another group of U.S. lawmakers. During a meeting on Friday, Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen told the 17-member delegation that Taiwan's Veterans Affairs Council will set up a new office in Washington, D.C. for the first time.
这几年来，在退伍军人事务上，台美的合作非常的密切。我要跟各位访宾说，从明年1月开始，我们退辅会将会派员常驻华府。
Apart from defense matters, Ms. Tsai says she hopes to further solidify bilateral trade relations through the Trade and Investment Framework Agreement, also known as TIFA. Mark Takano, chairman of the House Committee on Veterans Affairs and leader of the bipartisan delegation, said he expects such high-level visits to become more frequent, describing relations as at their best in recent decades.
Our commitment to Taiwan is rock solid and has remained steadfast as the ties between us has deepened. Taiwan is a democratic success story, a reliable partner, and a force for good in the world.
Mr. Takano and his colleagues have been in East Asia on a Thanksgiving trip to Japan and South Korea. Their brief stopover in Taiwan did not sit well with Beijing. Alyssa Slotkin, a Democrat from Michigan and a member of the delegation, said in a tweet that her office received a message from the Chinese embassy a day before her departure, asking her to call off the trip. The visit came as cross-strait relations continue to simmer. Beijing was already angered by U.S. President Joe Biden's decision to invite Taiwan to join a democracy summit next month. It also recently downgraded diplomatic relations with Lithuania after the country allowed Taiwan to open a de facto embassy. Victoria Jen, CNA, Taipei.
Nick Harper is live in Washington, D.C. for more on this story. Nick, some U.S. lawmakers have taken to social media to say that China put pressure on them not to make the trip.
That's right, Dawn. Yeah, there seems to have been contact from China ahead of this trip, and it's all about putting pressure on them to try and stay away. Obviously, that didn't work. They went ahead with the trip. But one of those lawmakers, a Democrat representative from Michigan, Alyssa Slotkin, she wrote on Twitter that when the news of our trip broke, my office received a blunt message from the Chinese embassy telling me to call off the trip. That letter from the embassy was later obtained by various US media outlets. They published more details from that letter, including this quote from the embassy. We strongly urge the Congresswoman immediately to cancel the planned visit to Taiwan and not to support the emboldened separatist forces of Taiwan independence. They also said in that letter that to go ahead with the trip would do huge damage to US-China relations and potentially to peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. So certainly a lot of pressure ahead of the trip. China angered that it was going to go ahead, that we had these 5 US lawmakers, a bipartisan delegation made up of both Democrats and Republicans carrying out this trip. And obviously they were trying to exert pressure ahead of it to try and stop it from happening.
Well, Nick, 2 visits now in a month. What point is the Biden administration trying to make to Beijing on this?
Well, we've certainly seen engagement being ramped up from the US perspective. They have been increasing what they do in terms of Taiwan. As Victoria mentioned in her report just a moment ago, the White House just this week invited Taiwan to join a democracy summit that will take place next month. Beijing itself is not invited. We've also, earlier on this week, saw the second round of economic dialogue between the US and Taiwan. And on top of that, the US President, Joe Biden himself, just a couple of months ago, said the US would defend Taiwan if it needed to against an invasion from Beijing. So we have seen efforts increased by the Biden administration to really solidify those ties that have been in place for 40 years or more between the US and Taiwan. Just in recent months, though, we have certainly seen them trying to strengthen those. But I guess it's also part of a broader issue, the US trying to build that coalition of partners and allies in the region to counter China. The Biden administration trying to say that it's not going to stand idly by when it comes to Taiwanese matters, that it will be there to support the island, but it's also trying to build that alliance to counter China. And we've seen increased engagement really in the region as a whole, the US taking part in ASEAN and APEC summits in recent weeks, also holding Quad meetings. They're very much trying to say that the Indo-Pacific region is a region of immense importance to the United States, and it will continue to build those alliances, all aimed at trying to counter China.
All right, Nick, thank you very much for that. Nick Harper there in Washington, D.C.